for about 3.5 years. Then COVID happened, we did all sorts of crazy stuff over the summer, and now of course we're here. So I grew up on the East Coast in New York, and then 13 to 18 every summer, worked at a really cool Michelin 3-star, changed it up every summer, and so on and so forth. I went back to New York, went to school all over the place. Basically, my passion is wine. I love teaching about wine, drinking wine. But I got super fortunate outside of the restaurant. My main thing is I work for the State Departments. So contracts with the White House, in Singapore, Taipei, Moscow, all over the world. And when they do their state dinners and functions, my job is to sort of have them prepped. So American wines are there. They can talk about them objectively, some cool subjective backstories, and that's just my whole life. It was my whole life before this COVID happened. So, but now it's kind of fun because I'm trying to do these events that we just don't usually do, because I don't know how long we're going to be able to stay open again. And this brings me to Dirk, Tanya. This restaurant's been so good for 3.5, 4 years. But the best thing about it is just meet really, really good people. And we're small enough where I can choose who I want to cook here now. They're definitely always invited. And I always, I'm biased and I'm patronizing a little bit, but it's also the truth. Dirk is a guy who just wants to learn about wine. He has a completely different background. He's obsessed about why. It's not just, hey, this is Syrah from Northern Rome, this price point, got this score. He wants to try everything, $10 all the way up to $1 million, but he wants to know why it's that. He's always sort of investigating that, and I kind of like that. You guys are going to talk like this all night, I know it, so yes.
I'm at $20 now.
Right, so we welcome Dirk and Tanya, and they'll introduce Absolution in the project for those who just don't know India in a little while. They brought their friend Megan, who lives from Apple Beach. Our new friends from Los Angeles, Pat.
No.
My pleasure. Okay. And my new friends all the way from Los Altos, which are my neighbors down there now. So you brought this really creepy tram I'm going to look at all night. So, so I'm going to have to turn that camera around. And then my really good friends, Chelsea has supported me as a friend in the restaurant from day one. She works at Cal Poly, although they don't deserve her. And then Anna, her cousin, is from St. Louis. Thanks for coming up. And then of course Chelsea's parents as well. So, how long have you guys been married?
37 years, yeah. October 15th.
Cool. So that's 1982, right? Yeah, cool. I don't know math, but I know I was born in 1982 and I'm 37. So cheers. They're always smiling together. This is great. Right, so we're going to do some champagne to start. We'll do 3 champagnes to start, just to go over the differences. Louis Roederer, big name, we all know this. This is their non-vintage cuvee. To me, non-vintage always tells the story of a champagne house. You see all these brands in the wine stores, wine lists, and so on and so forth. And sometimes you recognize them, sometimes you don't. But most champagne houses are obsessed with their house style. Louis Roederer is famous for Cristal. They make about 400,000 bottles of it. Okay, great. They make about 4 million bottles of their non-vintage. So there's a much larger footprint, and that's what people know the brand is Louis Roederer, right? So they blend about three vintages together, and if I had to define their house style, what I always say is that if it's 1,000,000 degrees out, warm, this is the perfect aperitif wine. It's a good place to start. Just bone dry, super fresh, and one of the main things they do in the winery to make it that way is there's no malolactic, which is super rare for champagne, okay? Obviously, a completely buttery Chardonnay from California is super soft, lots of malolactic, none of that here, so it's just super austere. And we'll go through 2 other styles after this as well. I made some cool dishes tonight, some I've done before, some newer ones later for Dirk's wines, but since we're sort of doing things illegal, we'll do more illegal foie gras tonight. So the foie gras comes in Hudson Valley. It's actually poached in a little ginger red oil and sauteed for sweetness. There's star anise on the base of the plate, and then homemade pistachio butter of sorts. So let me pour the champagne. I'll pass up the foie gras. I have bread for you. Any questions, let me know. Thank you so much for letting me.
Facilities that work out midnight cellars from the west side of Casa Robles.
So it's super concentrated, right? So very, very clean. It's a term they call washing the rind. It's just super rich, super clean. It's really good. The next champagne, Paul Barra, is a small producer, grower producer from the town of Uzi Champagne. It's a rosé, a traditional rosé. It's bone dry, super refreshing. We'll do another rosé champagne in a second that's a little different. This is much more just sort of bone dry and refreshing. And we're also going to do the first absolution, which Dirk will talk about in a moment. It's the Sangiovese. I put there's a pepper on it, right? And I always sort of say when I roast the pepper, I burn it right from the inside. Right? So that pepper is really good to cheese, but it's also good with the rosé as well. That's why I put it on there. And I sous vide the pepper for 3 days at 90 degrees just to break down the inside of it, and then I roast the outside. So what I would say to do is maybe have some of the cheese just with the champagne and enjoy that. And as Dirk's talking about the rosé, when he's done, save the rosé for the pepper and the remaining part of the cheese. Okay? Sorry, there's so many rules around here. There's so much wine, I better stop telling you what to do.
So Dirk, you do make yours in the champagne style? Or?
No, this is just a regular rosé.
Oh, it's
Yes.
not sparkling. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
the sparkling is from elsewhere.
Okay.
So all I was saying is have the champagne with some of the cheese, and then when you're done with that.
But that champagne is also a rosé champagne.
Even in the nose, too, there's similarities. But Sangiovese, I think, just makes a lovely rosé compared to what you're usually getting, which is a lot of Grenache-based rosé. And also, well, here not so much Pinot. Here mostly everything Grenache.
Oh my.
10 champagnes in a row. All 10 of them are rosé champagnes. 5 are traditional, where they bleed a little off the skin, and 5 are where they add Pinot Noir. This is a bar trick you'll now be able to do. So when you see this color, you'll know they added still Pinot Noir to it. And it makes the wine softer.
And there it is.
And as I'm preparing the next course, if you want to talk about your Marsan.
Okay.
The bubbles are still there. They're just
This is the old school, old world way of making blends, which are field blends. And so the two varieties, the Marsan and Roussan, are intergrown in the same vineyard. And not row by row or any rational kind of thing, but literally randomly. There'll be 3 plants of Marsan, 4 plants of Roussan, 2 plants of Marsan, up and down the rows completely randomly. Winemakers and vineyard owners back in the day kind of figured out there were certain varieties that grew well together and ripened around the same time, and that's how they did things. This does have a tie back to the old world as well. This comes from the Sharon AVA out by the Pinnacles National Park in Monterey County. Tiny, tiny little wine growing region, only about 350 acres under vine. But world famous, they were part of the 1976 Judgment of Paris when the U.S. took on the French wine tasting and shocked the wine world. Before that, U.S. winemakers had been going to France for years, decades, to go learn how to become better winemakers, but French winemakers never came to America to learn anything about wine. After the Judgment of Paris, that all changed. They became curious as to what was going on over here. In the early 80s, a young man came over to work a harvest at Chalon. He was from a 15th generation winemaking family in Hermitage in Rome. And lucky for him, the winemaker at Chalon at the time, Michael Michaud, he was Swiss and French, so they were able to communicate really well. They actually ended up becoming best of friends during that harvest. The young man stayed here, finished his college education, got his enology degree at UC Davis, and then went back to France to work in the family business. Michael, in the meantime, got engaged. When he got married, he went to Europe on his honeymoon. He stopped by the family estate to say hello to his friend and former pupil. Was now a 16th generation winemaking family as he had worked his way up to winemaker. They've been farming the same hillside in Hermitage for over 500 years. And as a thank you gift to Michael, he gifted him the cuttings from the Marsan Roussan from their estate vineyard there in Hermitage. And they had done it as a field blend as well. Michael wasn't looking to really, propagate this and sell it to other people. He treasured this very special gift from this family that has this tremendous history in Hermitage. And so instead of having the he literally was handed an envelope that said Marsan Roussan with a bunch of sticks in it. And instead of having them genetically analyzed to figure out which was Marsan, which was Roussan, he just propagated them randomly, just like they would have done back in the old world. And when he had enough to plant a Winemaker vineyard, grafted onto some rootstock, stuck it in the ground, and the result is the balance, which is what's in your glass now. The balance, the label features the yin and the yang, and the sunflowers. It's kind of, to me, it's the natural balance of the Marsan Roussan in the vineyard. It's a blend made by nature, not by man. I get to decide when to pick the vineyard, but I have to pick all the grapes. And I put 50-50 on the back, but the reality is, who knows what the actual,
awesome scallops, salt, scallop, that's it. They cut like butter. And then I make a chowder, clam chowder, but there's no cream in the butter, right? It's just so pure. Soup the potatoes for a few days. The clam and mussel stock, and clams, a little coconut milk. It's just so good.
So you're very excited about wine.
Alright.
I know this picture from a couple of weeks ago has gotten like so many likes on Facebook. I don't know why this particular picture has people love their chowder and the scallops.
People love scallops.
Especially when it's cooling down like this. And the fact that you've managed to do it dairy-free just blows my mind for how people it is.
That looks beautiful.
Smells like
They specialize in growing Iberian grape varieties there, so Spanish and Portuguese grapes. I have enjoyed many wines from that vineyard over the years, and when I had the opportunity to source my first white grape, that was the first place I looked to get Albarino. The label features the rooster and a starry morning. The artist very much loves Vincent van Gogh and all the, very influenced by him. And to me, it was because this wine is so crisp, bright, and fresh. It's kind of like a rooster waking up on a country morning. And it just also, not because I planned this, but when I ended up getting a tasting room at Morro Bay, this wine just goes so well with all the seafood down at Morro Bay. It's just perfect pairing for any kind of seafood. And I love it with the scallops, the chowder here. That's it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
It comes from two different parts of the vineyard. They have two different Albarino plantings. One part kind of imparts that beautiful minerality and crispness and acidity, and the other part contains those fruit notes that you're getting, which to me sometimes can be pear, peach, apricot, even sometimes venturing into tropical, like almost lychee, like characteristics depending on the day and the time and what you're having with it. But the blending of those two different parts of the vineyard, I find, is what makes this wine special. I love making small batch, single vineyard wines, typically single variety grapes for the most part. I almost consider the balance a single variety because I can't separate the two if I wanted to. To me, wine is kind of a snapshot of time and place.
So Pinot on the smaller glass.
And then the Grenache in the glass. Good.
Poached cinnamon. One of the first things I learned to do in France was Millefeuille. It's a pastry. It's 1,000 sheets of pastry supposedly, 100. So on top of it, I make a millefeuille of figs. So it's about 50 figs sliced thin with almonds, and then I'm gonna sort of flash fry them in the duck fat.
Je ne parle pas.
That's all I know.
Should we start talking about wine?
Yeah, sure.
So,
There you go.
So in the small glass is a 2018 Pinot Noir. It's from Etna Valley. The Rigetti Vineyard grows 8 different clones of Pinot. This is a single clone Pinot Noir. Whether it got here legally or illegally is questionable. Winemakers used to go work in France, and if the French liked them, maybe they'd give them some cuttings to take back home. If they didn't necessarily care for them, the winemakers would go in the middle of the night on the last night they were there and take some cuttings from the vineyard anyway. The Calera clone to me just makes this beautiful, bright red Pinot, not just in color, but also in aroma and flavor, just all the different shades of bright red, which you'll see in the label. I don't know where the wine's floating around.
Somebody can bring us the bottle.
There in the back. It'll come around. So I worked at a winery that specialized in Pinot, so I really got to know the different clones individually well. And Calera was just always one that stood out to me. So when it was time to make my first Pinot on my own, it was definitely that's what I was looking for. And this is that wine. The Grenache comes from the Jada Vineyard on the west side of Paso Robles, from the Willow Creek district. That's home to all the big boys like Saxo, Getter, Booker, Colado, and such. Bigger in style, richer, deeper, higher in alcohol, all those things that come from the west side of Paso. But still done in my style. No new oak. It doesn't taste like vanilla, like a lot of those wines end up heading in that direction. And to me, it's kind of the perfect fall feast wine. And it goes well with so many different kinds of foods. And you'll see the label has an image of the fall on it. So.
And then the red currants, I always serve them because we usually hear about red currants. It's kind of tasting aroma. They're all fish tasting. They're from Norway. They just cook them in their own juices for a few days. Pretty simple. So the duck smoked with cloves and the red currants.
How many days were the ducks smoked?
This is just
Everything he does is like 5 days,
Just
10 days,
16 days.
18 days.
16
For
days.
Christmas, everyone's gonna give me an Instant Pot. Yeah.
It's so simple.
He's never even heard of a microwave.
In the smaller glass is a blend of the Grenache that we just had along with Tannat. It comes from both come from the Jada Vineyard. We'll have the 100% Tannat and reserve. This was actually kind of a happy accident. About 10 months into making the Grenache and Tannat, I was checking on the wine in barrel, and I poured a little bit of Grenache into a glass and a little bit of Tannat in a glass, and I was like, oh, that's kind of good. And briefly, I thought maybe I should blend all of the Grenache and Tannat that I had into a Grenache Tannat blend, because blends are in, and that's what everybody loves. And I'm like, but that's not being true to what I do. So I did the best of both worlds. I did 1 barrel of Grenache, 1 barrel of Tannat, and 1 barrel of the Grenache Tannat blend, which is called Wicked Sensation. 55% Grenache, 45% Tannat, because that's how much I had left over, for no other reason. You'll see the label will make more sense once we have the Tannat. In the other glass is the 2018 Syrah from Chalon. This is also from the Michaud Vineyard, and this also has the same history as the Balance. This was the other part of the gift to Michael from the 16th generation winemaking family in Hermitage from their 500-year-old hillside there. Hermitage and Syrah are kind of synonymous in the wine world, and I feel really privileged to work with this particular clone that's grown here that Michael brought back from there. The label has aliens beating up cows, or perhaps aliens beating cows down to us. Either way,
It could be interpreted
either way. This was the first piece of art that I saw from the artist today. The made me interested in her artwork, and hence that's why it had to be on the label. The other thing is there is actually a herd of black and white cattle that graze in the field next to the vineyard there. And apparently they have quite the reputation, because a couple of months ago when I was up at the vineyard checking out this year's wine and bringing Michael his first finished bottle of the Syrah, he pulls it out of the bag and he looks at me and goes, "I wish those aliens would pick up my neighbor's cows and put them back on his property because they keep trespassing." So the label was meant to be, even though I didn't know it.
So you're pouring what now?
Zinfandel now. He's gonna go over it.
You know, there's that argument that Primitivo and Zinfandel are somehow related. This is probably more in that Primitivo Italian direction. Italian wine with food, of course, that's what they're all about there. This comes from a tiny little vineyard. It's just under an acre, called the Johnson Family Vineyard. This couple from Southern California bought a ranch to retire on in Monterey County, and they inherited just under an acre of Zin and just over an acre of Cab. I also make the Cab from that vineyard. And I went up there shortly after they bought the property because they advertised the Zinfandel grapes for sale. Unfortunately, the previous owner left behind some bottles of 2011 Zinfandel that he had made from that vineyard. Zinfandel doesn't always age so well, and that 6-year-old Zin, when the new owner poured it for me, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for, because it had that spiciness, that pepperiness, that food-friendly quality, and it wasn't a jammy oak bomb, so to speak. And so 3 weeks later, 2 friends and I went out and we picked the grapes for the very first Zin from that vineyard, 2017. After 6 hours, we were really hot and tired, so we managed to get only 1 barrel's worth of Zin out of that vineyard that year. Follow up to 2018, the 2017, which were released in February of 2020, sold out in about months. And so people have been clamoring for the next Zin, and I'm like, well, when it's ready, it'll be ready. And so in August, we bottled the 2018 Zin, which had been in barrel for 22 months. Thankfully, while we once again picked this ourselves, and honestly, we suck at picking. I really admire the people that do that for a living, but that's one of the reasons that I do it, because it makes me appreciate the hard work that goes into making the wine that ends up in your glass. And so with a couple of extra people and another year of experience, we were able to get 2 barrels for 2018. So that's what's in your glass now. Hope you enjoy it with whatever Ian has concocted here for us.
Is it the third duck yet?
Yes.
Yes.
And Zin and duck, this style of Zin and duck are going to be spectacular.
The wines are awesome. They're good. One time Madrid is based on Tanat, and it's kind of neat that they're doing on Tanat. And the
Yes.
styles, it's more rich. What's that?
His Tanat is awesome.
Everyone's happy?
Yep.
Yes, very much so.
Good. Take it over.
So the Tanat comes from the same source as the Grenache. It's the Jana Vineyard, just one barrel made of the Tanat. As Ian was
Just getting
saying,
full. It's lovely.
Tanat is a French grape, and I believe in Mandarin it's required to be 60% of the blend, but you rarely see 100% Tanat in France. Right? They grow a fair bit of Tanat around here. It was mainly used as a blender because Tanat loosely translates into tannin. It's one of the most tannic grapes, and also one of the deepest, darkest color grapes that you'll find. But lately, you've seen a lot more producers around here doing 100% Tanat. So when I was able to source this Tanat from the Jana Vineyard, I decided that instead of making all the Wicked Sensation blend of the Grenache and Tannat, that I would make 1 barrel of the Grenache, 1 barrel of the Tannat, and 1 barrel of the blend. That way everybody can kind of see what the Grenache and what the Tannat brought to the table, and then to see if the whole concept of synergy, thanks to Aristotle, is the whole greater than the sum of the parts, or are the parts greater than the whole? And I think having the, typically at the tasting room, we pour the Grenache and the Tannat and then the blend so people can taste them one right after the other and see how they work together as a blend. But definitely with the desserts that we're doing tonight, the Tannat is the sweetest wine that we're going to have tonight. And that's partly a function of Tannat can ripen a lot longer on the vine, and it's going to be it's a 16.2% alcohol wine, and I don't think you're going to smell a lot of heat on it, partly because the residual sugar that's left over from the yeast not quite being able to convert all the sugar to alcohol kind of mitigates that heat in the Tannat.
Beautiful.
And I don't know where the Tannat is, but she is our dark and mysterious Tannat girl on the label.
The whole night, I'm very much a natural, just like the ingredients. So I don't use sugar, don't use flour, don't use cream, don't use butter. It's all just the ingredients. And nothing's different with the dessert either. The orange, I cook in a pot for 8 hours on the heat and then 8 hours off the heat. But that process is done for 16 days. So it cooks it down, and when you get it, it's just water and orange, and a spoon will cut through the orange, get the whole entire rind. And then I make the risotto. Traditional risotto, I use a coconut milk and coconut oil, just to make it like pudding, and a little bit of star anise there. Cheers.
Cheers.
And I need a Dirk's a good guy. He's really passionate about his project. He's always trying to learn and get better. It's not this, sometimes he has big rants, or he's a real guy, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Robert.